Hello and welcome to Appy Hour. Appy Hours is Reinhardt University's chance to share what we've been doing through this pandemic teaching, discover those new tips and tricks, those new tools we've found to be invaluable, and to share that experience with our friends and colleagues. And today we have Keith Ray. And Keith, you're going to show us all about Mockaroo. So Keith, let's have it.
All right. Thanks, Mason. I really appreciate that. So when I teach a lot of my classes, I'm a biology teacher and a lab instructor here at Reinhardt. When I teach a lot of my classes, I want to teach my students hands-on materials that they can take with them into the real world, regardless of their background. So just because we have someone in a biology class doesn't always mean that they're going to become biologists. But there are tools that we can teach these students and that they can learn and take away from the experience. And one of those tools that we use a whole lot of is Excel. But through the last few years, and really became apparent at the beginning of the pandemic time, was that a lot of my students weren't participating and learning fully the mechanisms that I wanted to try to teach them in Excel. And I learned this through imaging. So this is how it started. I gave my students an assignment. I gave them a format for a data set. They collected the data and would go home, enter that data in, and then they were supposed to create a graph. So a very simple process of visually showing me your data set. Well, what I began to notice was that the data sets suspiciously all had the exact same fonts, the exact same colors, the exact same titles. Nobody had typos. So I started asking myself, well, what was going on? So I started downloading all of their PDF images and realized really quickly that they were all coming from the same subset of IP addresses. So if you're not all that tech savvy, each time that you create something, your computer has a unique identifier called an IP address. And whenever you save a file in most programs nowadays, or you generate data from something, it stamps it with your unique identifier address. And so I was able to track it back to one or two students in the class who were doing the actual work and sharing the data files with everyone else. And they were just simply submitting them to me through their online environment. So I said, well, this is not really a test of how they can do this. You can call it cheating prevention if you want to, but it was more of a way of exploring a way to hash out whether they really knew what they were doing or not. And so how could they do this? Well, they all needed unique data sets. But in lab, we didn't always create unique data sets. They did group work. So I wanted to take it a step further. And I had scoured the internet and thought to myself, well, there has to be something out there that we can generate randomized data with. So that was what led me last year to discover Mockaroo. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys and explain a little bit about Mockaroo's background, but it's not what I use it for. So, all right. So what you guys should be seeing is the homepage to a website, mockaroo.com. And Mockaroo was actually developed for app testing. People who collect data through apps need to test the integrity of their either app process or analyze their database analysis on the back end. So when they collect all this data, do their systems in the background know what to do with a lot of data collected at one time? So Mockaroo is a response to generating massive data sets. Well, I don't need a massive data set. I just need a few lines of randomized numbers on an Excel sheet. But when we take a look at Mockaroo, I'm just going to hit the upgrade now. And let's see. You can have up to 200 downloads a day. This is an API request. So most of you are not going to have more than 200 downloads a day. But if you need more than that, you can actually generate up to 1 million records a day of randomized data. So I'm showing you this to give you an understanding of Mockaroo was actually built for something much, much larger than most educational institutional needs. And they also limit you to 1,000 lines per table. If you're under the free version that we're going to look at today, if you pay for this, you can actually go up to tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of data lines per file that you download. So we'll go back to the Mockaroo homepage and do a little bit of exploring, and then I'll show you guys some random data and how it randomizes it a little bit, and then some cool things you can do. And I'll show you how I actually wound up using Mockaroo. So you can create a free profile on Mockaroo, and they do not bombard you with thousands and thousands of emails when you create one of these profiles. So I use my professional account for this. But you'll notice that I'm logged in. There are lines and headers up here that says schemas. That's where you're going to create your unique data sets that it's going to generate random data out of. You can upload data sets that you would like to. You can pin these two things together. We can mock these, and this is how you're going to actually wind up sharing this stuff with your students. One way that you can do it, and they've changed it very recently, and I haven't kept up with all the changes. You can also develop scenarios and then projects. And projects are somewhat important if you want to share this with other colleagues, or if you want to see and have fun with your students, see if they can develop their own unique data sets. Excuse me, loud truck going by. You can also always go back and download your schemes. So these randomized data setups that you create are called schemas. And then there's lots of other things that you can do. The other thing I want to point out is, see, there's a community forum. This is so powerful. There are people all over the world that are inside of this community forum that are there that will be more than happy to help you. And as a matter of fact, when you create an account on Mockaroo, you have to go through the community forum, type up a statement, and go through a training. So it's really intuitive how they walk you through all the things that you can access with this resource. There's also some of these tutorials, like I mentioned, they're really powerful as well. You can actually go in and code on the backside of this. So it's a really great coding tool. The coding language is fairly easy to use. You'll see some of it as we go along. But these are just some of the things that you can do. So exploring a little more, when you open up Mockaroo on the website, you're going to notice that it automatically sets up a schema for you to use. And you can start altering this schema in any way you want to. So we can look and see that this is the field names, the type of data that's going to be generated, and then options. And as you change the type of data generated, your options change pretty drastically. So in this field name, there is an ID, so a unique identifier. We can randomly generate first names, last names, emails, genders, and IP addresses. You can click to add other fields, and if you don't want a field, you can just delete it. So it's really intuitive to use on the user front end. I'm just going to hit, and well, one more thing. You can also generate the number of rows. So this is a free account. We'll maximize out of 1,000 rows. The format, you can export as comma separated, tab delineated, database, SQLs, other types of databases, custom outputs. And for most of us, Excel files. You can also do XMLs and other things. And they keep up with this pretty well. But if you know app backgrounds, then a lot of this is not unfamiliar to you. There's also line endings. So do you want it Unix or Windex coded? If you're CSV file, headers, and then you can append data sets. So I'm just going to tell it that I want not 1,000 lines, but let's just do 100 of not XML, but Excel file. Notice a lot of the choices go away. We can preview this down here on the bottom. We can download the data. We can save the scheme. And there's other things that we can do. Let's preview it and see what it gives us. So you can see that every row gets a unique identifier, a unique number over to the right or left-hand side, unique first names, unique last names. And in the background, Mockaroo has databases of just randomized data. If it's like somebody went through and copied names out of the phone book and digitized them into a database somewhere, and Mockaroo just pulls from that. you'll notice that the emails are also related to the name data. So with random at something's dot whatever. Then in this case, there's random gender data. And you can see that they have included a multitude of gender options in this randomization. And then unique IP addresses. These are randomized numbers. These are not real IPs. I'm sure that they correspond to something sometimes in the world, but they are not real. You can download these. I'm not going to download it yet. I'm going to close this out. But that's just a look at one subset really quickly, bam, right off the top of the start here. But let's look at the different types of data that you can generate. So I said I'm a biologist, and I'm mostly working with numbers that I want my students to have. But if you are someone who works in business, you may want to play with car model data. You may want to look at sales data. Does this car make and model or year generate random sales data, either in values, sales numbers, revenue? You can do all kinds of things like that. You can even generate random avatar images. If you're computer science, you're trying to do app development or database development, you can do all different kinds of file downloads that will be randomized. They even have setups for randomized car VINs, colors, random cities, country codes, credit card numbers. And as you can start to see, it's a little overwhelming. So you probably want to start with some kind of template that you want to mimic. So if you know what kind of data you want to work with, and you know kind of data ranges, the way stuff should be set up, then that would be a helpful thing for you to start with. And as you can see, there's a lot of advanced stuff. So this is more advanced database app development, basic things, randomized if you want to analyze random library data. So if you're trying to test an app, or if you want to see if somebody understands how to handle this data, ISBNs, you can randomize password data. There's lots and lots of things, times, number rows. You can randomly choose the lorem ipsum paragraph data just to see if your database can handle that stuff. And then number data can be really easily set up, and we'll play with numbers in just a few minutes. Again, there's the car data, commerce. There's even Bitcoin addresses to see if your app development or procedural stuff can handle Bitcoin addresses. There's even stock market data that can be randomized on there. So this is a pretty powerful tool across a multitude of disciplines. There's even categories for health data. So this could be applicable to nursing, and see if you can find, identify, code for, even in healthcare administration, this would be something powerful to use, randomize that data and see what your students can do with it. There's IT data, like we've already mentioned. It'll come up with randomized URLs. Some of these are real, some of these are fake. Different domain levels, different domain types, randomized usernames. So there's even things in there that can do latitude and longitude. And for some of you who know some of my background, I deal with GIS, and one of my things I want to do is see how randomized the GIS data is, and how much fun that would be to play with my GIS students to see how badly I could throw them off their game in a contest of who can figure out what first. And then, there's different things: animal common names, plant scientific, animal scientific, plant families. So they've really done a lot. There's been a lot of development, and this started off full force as someone just messing around. He needed something for the companies he worked for to test their apps. But almost all of this has been added through updates from users. So users suggested information, and then you can create your own information as well, and there are ways to code for that, but I won't be showing anyone that today because I haven't done it myself. So what I want to throw in really quick the uses to me, and what I'm looking for is the number data. So one thing that is very useful to me was generating randomized number data. Get a little overwhelming until you see an example. So let's say that I want a number in the field, really doesn't matter. We'll just call it sample. We'll call it sample 1. We'll randomize sample 1 information. And let's say that my data is not in whole numbers. Let's say it's on a range, a scale from 0 to 1, right? So I can do 0 to 1. And how many decimals? Well, a lot of the machinery that we use reads in a scale of 0 to 1. And let's say that I just want 2 decimal places. Okay, so it's whatever it's going to be is 0.00 or 0.02 or 0.44. You can also have a choice to leave a percentage of them blank. And the reason this is important is if you're an app developer, then you might have people who don't enter in data. So how does your program, how does your database handle blank data cells? The other thing is that you can set up and formalize this stuff. This can get a little tricky. You kind of have to learn the code. And I'm not really going to go into code right this second. I'll pull up my schema in a few minutes where I've already developed this for one of my classes. But you can do a lot of editing on the back end of this. You can customize this in a very, very unique set of ways. So one example that I saw was car sales prices. There was someone who wanted to analyze car sales prices. So they would put in the car make, the model, and the year, and then they would randomly generate money value data for the price of the vehicle. Well, when they looked at the prices of those, it wasn't realistic. So the money values were way outside of a range where, a used, 2000 Ford Taurus was going for $25,000, but a brand new Porsche might have been randomized to go for $5,000. So you can go into the back end and generate formula if then kind of statements to dictate those ranges a little bit more precisely so that they're more accurate data for you to manipulate and test in the back end. So if we generate this, we'll preview this again. And notice that my sample 1 number here, I didn't mess with any of this other stuff, but we're just playing around. So sample 1, all of a sudden you can see is randomized decimal data. All right, so let's close and actually look at something that I developed. So here is data that I developed, a scheme that I developed for a cell respiration lab that we have. And so cell respiration lab is a big thing in our intro biology labs because students write lab reports on this data. So one thing I wanted to do was test to see, they get multiple weeks. They get multiple weeks to collect data, learn how to analyze that data, and then they collect their own without my input, and then they generate graphs and stuff like that. So this was more for the test weeks for people who didn't get to participate in that. That was more of what this was for. And so as you'll see, this is a time series set of data. And I just did the sample numbers. So they have 3 samples by row number, no blanks, no formula edits. And at 0 minutes, I wanted them to have a number. And the data in the book, or the process or the procedure in the book, says that if it's below an output of 0.05, then it's invalid data. So there's something wrong with your machine or there's something wrong with your setup. But most students would see a maximum range of 0.15. And so I wanted output of 2 decimal places, somewhere between this and no blanks. They should always be getting data. Well, they take measurements in increments of 5 minutes, all the way up to a total of 30 minutes. And so what you'll notice is that after 5 minutes, I said that my minimum value should be the same as my maximum from the previous row. So they should it should grow somewhat. And I said, well, it shouldn't be over this value here. Again, 2 decimal places all the way down. At 10 minutes, notice that my numbers start to overlap. They don't connect. And that's because when we look at the trends from years of doing this project, we know that the data fluctuates during the analysis, the output of the data machines. And what I did is I built bigger and bigger ranges so that the values could go up and crash down, but not too much in either direction. And all the way up to a maximum of 0.75 in the last measurement. But notice the minimum is 0.3, so it didn't change that much, but I wanted there to be fluctuation. So I built the ranges so that they could do this and fluctuate. There's only 3 samples that they measure over these 30 minutes. And I wanted them to get a comma separated value. It opens up like a regular Excel file in Excel, and they can still do the data manipulation I want them to. And then I generated a URL. So this is the URL that my students can click on down here at the bottom. I can share this with them, and they will get that data. There's also a public URL that I wound up including. And then I saved this scheme. So let's take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to download, or we can preview it if we want to, but I'll start downloading it in just a moment. So here's a randomized set of that data in a table form. And I'll quickly do this and visualize it for you. Before I go on, do you guys have any questions so far?
No, looks really good. Especially if I'm trying to get a mock set of data for a business course or an accounting course, or I've even done this in my educational technology course where I need a random list of names and shirt sizes for prospective band members to, get used to keeping records. This is perfect.
Yeah.
I probably spend 40 minutes creating that every semester.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You might not even give this to your students. This might even help you not have to spend time randomly generating data on your own.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
And you could download one of these files, share it with everybody, and say, do this process to this data. Everybody gets the same output. Mm-hmm. And then click on the web link, get your own data, repeat process on your own data.
Yeah. So
there's a dual teaching, technological process there where students are immersed in this process twice, once through your guidance and once on their own. And you shouldn't have the exact same output. So just to give a demonstration of this, I'm going to download the data, and you'll see this pop up multiple times. And I'm going to share this screen with you. Actually, I'm not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create 2 charts. Okay, can you guys see the Mockaroo page and the Excel file?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the first chart. So I just made a quick line graph like I would like my students to do for this data. I'm going to download another file. And if you guys look at the top, yes, I've downloaded these data files multiple times on my computer to play with them. And I'm going to build this one over here really quick. And you'll notice that the 2 sets of data are not identical. So they follow a similar trend, but if you'll notice, particularly on the orange lines here, they're kind of dichotomous. They plummet on the last data set here, and then they rise on the last data set here. And so my students would have to explain to me what each of these data sets would mean as well. So the differences in the 2 are way more powerful. It's seeing how well my students understand this process versus just seeing if they can repeat somebody else's data. All right, so there are, don't save these. No, don't save those. So the other thing is that you can create or this does create web links. And so I can copy this and even put it into the chat box on wherever chat went. Let's see, where did chat go? More. I can put it in the chat and paste it. And you can click on that. It will automatically download. It won't even open. It only opens the temporary page browser there and then shuts it back down. And you get the file as well. So the students never have access. If you share the link with them, the students never have access to the schema. They can't go in and download the schema. They can't see the schema to even interpret it. They can't alter it. All they get is the randomized data from the Excel file. So it's pretty secure in terms of what students see from you from Mockaroo. And I like that aspect as well. Some of the other things that I had tried, the students actually had to go to the web page. They could see the schemes, they could see the data, they could see how you set it up and download the file from there. In this case, you can tell them a story about it and they can get the randomized file without seeing all the background work that you've done to it. So that is the API there. You can also generate mock APIs. So this is part of the coding that goes on in the background. You can generate a new API. And in this case, I chose the post one, and it does the exact same thing that the data link that they now provide in the schemas does. And you can try this in your browser, but you have to tell it what schema you want. And so if you've got more than one schema, you have to type in the name of the schema. So a little bit of coding there, and then tell it to generate 3, and that means 3 rows of data. So like I said, I really like Mockaroo for this purpose of just generating randomized data. And I think it has a lot of utility across a lot of different disciplines. I know it's helped me a whole lot in being able to generate this randomized data for my students in a particular lab, but there are a lot of other things that we're going to try with it as we move forward. But that's it. That's all I have for Mockaroo today.
Thank you for sharing that. What other applications are you thinking about using for it in your own courses, or even for the grant or something like that? Like what do you envision this could do for you?
Yeah, I want to see how I want to see how it handles other bits of data, other types of data. So I'm not always the most imaginative person when it comes to like building randomized data sets, like even fake data sets. I like to mimic them off of something. So there are the GIS database things that I want to play around with. So this might be very valuable to see if students can work through issues in GIS databases. So like nonsense data. I think I could generate a lot of nonsense data, data with error in it, and put this into an existing file. So you can append this data to already known data sets. And so can you find outliers for statistical analyses? You can generate really good outliers with this data. I think that giving some of this data to some of our STEM scholars to learn how to use Excel even more deeply than what we teach them in some of our classes, I think this would be good for kind of poking and prodding at them to say, hey, deal with this data, see what sense you can make of this data. I think it would be powerful for some of those kind of applications as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because to me, it's not so much the answer that you get from the data. It's, can you just take any data that we give you that fits the model we want you to have and make sense of it? So can you go through the process of analysis, no matter what the data tells you? Because we tell students all the time in the sciences, trust the data, follow what the data says. What does the data tell you? And this is a really good application of that. They have no choice but to follow the data.
Have you found, since you started using it in your classes, that students are able to easier identify those patterns in the data? Since it seems to me that since you kind of avoided that issue of sharing data and cheating, it seems like students are having to immerse themselves more in the data. Have you seen that?
A little bit. I'm not ready to say yet. There haven't been enough students use it yet that I'm comfortable saying, yeah, I think I see that they're using the process and not each other so much.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't had any problems with people sharing their information yet.
Good. That's good. So you've overcome that issue that you were hoping to overcome, right? By using it. For sure. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And no matter how many times they click the button, I believe that one data set I was playing around with, I did just a quick statistic, and there was something almost 1 trillion unique possible outcomes for the randomized data. And I was like, yeah, they could hit the button for a lifetime and almost never come across the exact same set of data. So
wow,
that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
But
thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else that you would like to add on to that, or that you'd like to share with us?
No, other than just coding. The coding language, I don't know where the data or the info is about it, but there is, just really quickly, some good tutorials on here.
Okay.
That are YouTube videos. Oops. Gotta hit the back button, not the down button. This is no joke. They've changed the website in the last week and a half.
Yeah. Of course, right?
So I hop on here last night and I'm like, whoa, you look different.
Yeah.
There are some fact-based items on here where it will start telling you how to access things. I do not see, believe it or not, I guess it's going to be buried in the community forum. The community forum is amazing for learning this stuff. Really, really is amazing. But even like my country is not listed. So what do you do if there's a country you want to play with in the data, but it's not even listed? So they teach you how to do all this stuff. And most of it goes to learning how to code. And I want to say that the coding system was Rosa. I'll have to look it up. And if anybody has a question that sees this, they're welcome to ask me. But it seems like they may be getting away from some of the coding that they had. So they've kind of automated a few other things. But I don't see it. There was a really good tutorial on the coding.
Yeah.
And now I don't see it.
That's okay. Maybe I missed this, but how did you stumble upon Mockaroo? Because I haven't seen this around, and I'm sure it took a little bit of digging on your part to find this. So how did you?
It did. Late nights, sitting up after everybody went to bed, and just kind of bashing my head against the wall, so to speak, saying, randomized data generators, and they were nothing like what I wanted, nothing. And I knew that I couldn't be the only person in the world that needed a randomized Excel file, but I needed it to set up certain ways. And I know Excel has a random data generator in it, but it's not very user friendly, and it's not as valuable and flexible as what you see with Mockaroo.
Yeah.
But it was really, how did I find it? Google search after Google search after Google search.
Yeah, I can imagine. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've been down those rabbit holes to find, teaching tools, and it can get a little frustrating to try to find specifically that one thing that you need, especially something that's this specialized.
Yeah. And when I ran across it the first time, it says, Mockaroo random data generator. And I got on here and I was like, wow, this is really intimidating. And I don't know that I'm up to piddling with this tonight.
Yeah.
And my wife, we'd already put the kids to bed. My wife was sitting here with me and she said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I found something and I don't know if it's the answer to what I need. And she sat in here with me for a few minutes. And apparently I got really, really quiet as I got engrossed into trying to understand what I was looking at on the homepage here. And I was just clicking buttons. That's all I was doing. I don't think people give enough credit to the value of just button clicking randomly.
Yeah, just playing around with it.
Just playing around with it.
Just playing around, exactly.
And apparently she told me good night and I mumbled good night and I didn't go to bed till about 5 a.m. And I think she told me good night at 10. And I had learned the coding language that night and generated multiple schemas just playing around.
Wow.
Yeah, and reading community page after community page of just how does this work? How can I do it better? I don't understand what that word means. Who doesn't understand what this word means? So it was really powerful. I did the entire automated tutorial that night as well.
Wow. Yeah, because right now from the outside, it does look a little intimidating. And I'm trying to think, how could I use this in my own courses? And I think that would be a case for me as well, having to just tinker with it and trying to figure out what could I do. Yeah,
and a lot of it, I started looking the schemas that I showed you. So the files that I downloaded and showed the graphs of. To begin with, I was like, how do we change the field name? What does this mean? Oh, I can drag this. I don't have to delete it and retype it. Oh my goodness. And that started saving 5 minutes here. And what had taken me an hour to create the first time took me 30 minutes the second time. And then, and it's a very forgiving software. The other thing that they have changed is they've put the preview button here. And to me, I didn't have to download it every time. So I was creating a scheme and then downloading it and looking at it in Excel and saying, oh gosh, I messed that up. That doesn't make any sense. What did I do over here? Okay, let's change that, download it again. That takes up a ton of, I must have deleted 200 files at the end of the night.
Wow.
Now you just hit preview and ta-da, there's a preview.
I think this would be great in a statistics course, great in an accounting course where you need that. And even eventually maybe training students, and that would be, upper level students, grad students on how to use this. But it has a lot of potential for sure.
Yeah. And I think classes like computer applications, teaching students R. So create tons of CSV files in R and export them and import them into R for whatever you can do with them in R. It's a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate you going over that with us, and I'm hoping that you can stick around for our 4:00 session. We're going to be having Morgan Hudson from Creekview High talking about question formulation technique with shared documents. So we hope to see you in just a little bit.
Thanks.
Take care.